Okay, so we're gonna get this started. So for y'all that weren't here, my name is Francisco Martin. I'm gonna be talking a little bit about things that I've learned while working with customers, both in indie development and in corporate development. So a little bit about myself. I graduated from Georgia Tech in 2016 with a bachelor's of computer engineering. I started learning Unity development while being at Georgia Tech. I actually didn't start to learn it through game development. What I did was I had an internship with the Home Depot as a software engineer, and they were looking somebody to helm a project that could have you in VR decorate your kitchen and check out different features of the kitchen and products that we own in VR. So that's how I actually learned how to do Unity development and VR development. I actually learned those two at the same time. And while I was there, I worked in a few projects with Jeremy Lamb, who went on to found and be the CEO of Virtual World Arcade, which is an indie development company focusing on VR experiences. And right after college, he hired me to work with him, so that my first job out of college was working in an independent studio making VR experiences. After that, I went over to Subdream Studios to work on more VR things. While there, I actually worked on a contracted Bandai-Namco project, Galaga Fever, which we'll see a GIF in a bit soon. And now I am a game developer for Wizards of the Coast, working mostly on Magic Arena, if you've heard of it. So, next slide. So, yeah, so some of the game projects that I have done before, there at the top left is Galaga Fever, which was the game that Bandai Namco hired us to do. It is a VR game with this whole peripheral. You have a gun peripheral, floor shakes, you can feel the wind and everything. Before that, I worked on Cybernet Combat, which is a turn-based, a round-based combat game in which whenever that bar fills up, you get new powers, you choose which powers you use, and then you go back into the fight. And then here is what I'm working on currently, which is Magic the Gathering Arena. It is a digital version of our of Magic the Gathering. So that's what I work on right now. So the first two were indie development projects. This one is a corporate development project. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit more about identifying your customer. So right now it seems like my Unity has okay, there we go. Identifying your customer. So we're gonna be talking about who a customer is, why it's important, and things that I've learned while interacting with customers, especially specifically in game development. So first of all, let's talk about who is our customer. So, oh, by the way, I couldn't find good clip art for the whole presentation, so practically all the slides will have a Magic the Gathering card, because I am a nerd and that's where I work at, so I just made a card that somehow ties with what I'm talking at that point in time. So if you are a Magic the Gathering fan, you'll get a kick out of it. If you're not, don't worry about the cards. So a customer is a party who has the final word in a project completion. And not just project completion, but project success. So they are the ones who will be defining the deliverables. They are the ones that you're going to be talking to and say, hey, is this done? Is this what we're feeling like? Is this successful deliverable? Some examples of these are the publisher. If you have a publisher that tells you, hey, we want to publish your FPS game, we're going to give you resources, but we're looking for this market game. That could be a publisher. A contractor is essentially just someone who says, hey, I want this game, I'll just pay the bills. It can be an internal team. This is much more often the case if you're in completely independent development where you don't have a producer or a publisher paying for it. If you are internally like developing it and then going all completely indie, then you can be internally have a customer. Or it could even be you if you're doing a single person venture, then you can be the customer. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works if you yourself are both the developer and the customer. But the important thing is that all parties, everybody, programmers, artists, designers, everybody needs to be clear on who the customer is. Because not knowing the customers, as we'll see, who the customer is, as we'll see, can create some problems. So, what if you are the customer? What if you are, like a lot of people here, I'm assuming you are in independent game development and you just want to create a game and you want to go out to Steam. How do you have the experience, and how do you have the tools to be able to you yourself set your goals and be able to be your own customer? First things that are very important is to know your biases, know which places you are being a programmer, which places you're being a designer, and which places you're being a customer. Treat it as if you were a third-party member, looking outside from the looking for inside from the outside, and deciding what things are actually good and what things are actually bad for the project that we're doing. As you know, and a lot of things that are very art focused, good and bad are very subjective. So it's much more about what is that you want to accomplish. What are your goals? So keep a project spec as a living document. The living document in game development is what we call something that needs to be updated every so often to make sure that it is have the most up-to-date data of how things are going. And you're also going to need to do some intermittent review. So you're going to need to do how the project is moving towards its goal. Are you on track for completion? Is the current path the best one? Or do you need to update the project spec? Now, it's very important here that even though there is a living document, this doesn't mean that it's set in stone. Things here that you will be doing will change. Everything in game development is all about iteration, and things will change. What is important though is that they don't change so much that you have no idea how much progress you've made. Try to make any big giant changes happen only during these intermittent reviews where you are, I don't feel like this is the right way to go about this. Let's change this. Let's update these things. So move on to the next one. And why is it important? Why is it important to be able to identify a customer and deciding who gets the final say on the success? Well, identifying a customer is going to determine the future of the project and the future of your career. Remember, a customer is the one who decides if something is successful or not. And when I'm saying customer here, I'm not necessarily saying your players, the ones that are buying the game, the ones that are playing the game. If you are part of an internal team, your customer is going to be a producer who is internal there. And even if the game flops or even if the game doesn't do as well as you'd hoped, because if your customer is happy with what you produced and how you did it, it's more of their fault for not being able to communicate with the market research and not being able to go with their customers and getting the right thing. So you can succeed and you can make your customer happy and you can actually have a good networking presence even if your game doesn't do as successful. So that's more about more personal and your career, why it's important for you to know who your customer is. But even inside the project, when you fail to identify your customer, you're going to lose time. You're going to lose design work that might have been really awesome, but isn't what the customer wanted. And you're going to lose art assets. So if the customer wanted a very chibi art style, abstract art style, but you're going very realistic, you spent all that time and art assets and creative power to create this, but you're not going to be able to use it in the final game. And that's even more of a problem if you are in corporate, because that means that those art assets are still owned by corporate, so you won't be able to reuse it outside for another project. So make sure to identify your customer. While I was working with Bandai-Namco, with Subdream Studios with Bandai-Namco to create Galaga Fever, we failed to identify our customer. We were talking a lot with a project manager who we thought was the final say on the project and whether our game was looking good or not, or was it meeting their expectations or not. And the problem is we assumed that that was the customer. So we had a lot of iterations every 2 weeks, every month, about the project. Hey, is it going well? Do you like it? And all these things. And they were saying yes, yes, yes. And what so happened was that the actual customer had not seen any progress or had not played the game for over a month and a half. So by the time they actually went and came along and played it, it didn't meet their expectations. They didn't want this design. They felt like we failed at producing the necessary designs that they were looking for. So we lost a month and a half of time in development because we weren't able to determine who the final say was going to be. So it's very important to determine who the final say. This is also very important and good if you are in a small internal team to identify who the customer is. Because if you are doing a democratic game development where everybody gets a say and everybody develops, some things might not be able to be decided democratically. And being able to have one person who will not only have the leadership capabilities of saying what is good and what is bad for the project, but also having the responsibility of whether those things succeed or fail will fall on them. So being a customer is not just a dictator deciding this is what it is. It's also all the responsibility is now on you whether it succeeds or fails. So now that we've identified who our customer is and what they what role they play, and how to if you're a customer, how to separate yourself from the position, let's talk about setting expectations. How do you set expectations for your customer how to set expectations with your customer? So, first step, document clear deliverables. Talk about what pieces are going to be delivered and by when. Make sure that those key deliverables are clearly defined, and that they have a multiple scheduled points in which you will be looking for demos, when you're going to have demos to reiterate on those deliverables, and when you're going to be delivering them. Make sure to overestimate your effort hours per item. This is something that as you get better and better and better at this, you're not going to need to overestimate as much. But when you're beginning and you're learning a new technology and you're working with a new customer and you don't know how they work, it's important to overestimate to try to make space for things that are not foreseen. Maybe your customer changes their mind, and we're going to talk about what happens when your customer changes their mind. Maybe a technology is much harder to work with than you expected. Maybe you are blocked. If you're working in an internal team, across team features, maybe you might be blocked by other teams' development efforts. So make sure that you overestimate your hours to make sure that you are always trying to deliver on time. And also communicate the pros and cons of certain designs and development paths. Sometimes when you're talking with customers, they just say that they want things without thinking of the repercussions of those wants. And so being able to communicate with them, okay, if you want this thing, that's great, but it might not succeed with your goal of X, Y, or Z. So for example, just a crazy example, let's say your customer wants a rated E game, and then they talk to you about, oh, we want guns in the game. At that point, you have to communicate like, hey, what this design philosophy, this design that you're asking for is not in line with your goal of making it rated E for everyone. So you're going to need to either change your goals or change what you want. Okay, there we go. Oh, it went 1, 2. Okay, no, okay. So tools of the trade. How do we set expectations, and what tools do we have to set expectations? My two favorite tools for setting expectations are the minimal viable product, the MVP. I'm sure that a lot of people, game developers out there, are very informed of what an MVP is, but for those who aren't, a minimal viable product is essentially the smallest mechanic, the smallest piece of game that you can create that will get across an idea of what your game is. So if you have a game such as Tetris, you can just remove holding the piece, you can remove point system, you can remove a lot of the pieces. All you need is falling blocks and deleting those falling blocks, and that's it. You don't need anything else to get the idea across. And the reason why this is so important with setting expectations is that you can show this minimal viable product to a customer that says, hey, play this minimal viable product. This is not the final product, but it'll give you a good idea about how the game will feel when it's done. And if this is not what you wanted, this is not what you feel, then we can save a lot of time, a lot of money, because we didn't spend too much time creating this minimum viable product. Very important though, if you are making a minimal viable product for someone who isn't into game development, this is not going to happen that often, but if you for some reason have a contractor or a marketing team that says, hey, we want to make a game to market our new movie and we want to make a web game for it, minimal viable product is going to be very, very low on art assets. It's going to be very rough. It's going to be very choppy, and it's very important to kind of set expectations about what an MVP is to those people, because a lot of the times you show them an MVP and they think, this looks stupid, this looks horrible, we don't want it to look like this or anything. So this is something that even an MVP needs to be set expectations in of itself to kind of talk about, to show them to other people. The second tools of the trade, and something that I learned while working at Wizards of the Coast, is a Moscow. A Moscow, it's an acronym standing for must, should, could, and will not. So obviously every section is self-explanatory. The idea is that underneath each section, you'll write features and mechanics that are must deliverables. You'll have some that are should deliverables. You'll have some that are could deliverables, and some things that you are straight up saying, we are not doing this. This is not something that we want to do. This is not something that takes too much time and resources. We do not want to do this. Now, what's important here is who gets to demote from one section to the next in each one. So in must, the musts are very much said by the customer, and they can only be demoted down to a should by the customer, because the customer feels that these are the key mechanics and features that need to be done to successfully finish this project. Should be demoted only by designers. So designers, now that they know what the customer's goals are and what they must or want, designers create should features of, okay, towards those goals, these features are things that we should do because they will enrich the experience of those musts. These are things that are demoted by designers a lot. Then you have could, and could are demoted by producers and engineers. So these are things that are demoted whether because we don't have the technology, we don't have the resources, we don't have the time. Engineers and producers talk about what their resources are and define, okay, these are things that we're going to try to hit. There are stretch goals, but we won't feel bad if we demote them down to will not because we don't have time. So yeah. And another important thing about a Moscow is the first time you bring this tool to a customer and things like this, there's a tendency of the customer of just getting all the features and all the mechanics and just shoving them all into a must category because they feel like everything is super important and must be done. And in that point is when you try to bring in your diplomacy and try to talk to them about, hey, there's the time that you've given us, we can't do all this. So either something needs to budge. Either you're going to give us more time, you're going to give us more resources, or we can bring down the scope and just move some things to should and could. So these are things that you're going to need to want to talk. And these are really good tools when you're working with an outside customer. So why is it important to set expectations? And to have your customer invested in talking while you're talking about expectation. And it's just that. It makes them more invested. It makes them feel more like they're a part of the team. It makes them feel as if the success and failure is not just of the team, but of them as well. A second thing is quality projects that don't meet expectations because they decided to do something different are failed projects. if you get hired to do a third person shooter, but you decide to make a first person shooter because you felt like it doesn't matter how good that first person shooter is. If your customer wanted a third person shooter, you failed at your project. And that is going to be very harmful to your career goals, because it sets you out as a renegade developer that doesn't follow instructions. It also reduces the confusion in development teams. A lot of the times it happens in corporate where the information of expectations doesn't flow downstream. So while leadership knows exactly what they want, the programmers and artists need to be on blind faith about what to do. And that's not really a good situation. You never want to have your programmers and your developers to be just blindly have blind faith on what the project wants and needs are. So by setting the expectations and making the expectations clear to everyone, you're trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page, everybody's invested, and everybody is doing a great job to make the best project possible. So, third category, scheduling demos. So you are going to want to schedule a lot of demos with your customer. You're going to want to be iterating on your design to make 100% sure that your design is actually be moving towards the best thing. So like we had talked about making a living document and having papers and everything like that. It's very important to know that those are not written in stone. Don't ever feel like you are beholden to those things 100%. Things can change. And a lot of times things do change. So the big changes come about usually during these demos. And it gives an opportunity for an outside party to play the game. Outside parties include your customer. Your customer is very much, a lot of the time, an outside party, but also lets on other people to play test on the design and all of these things. You can communicate with them what worked, what did not work. And when you see things did not work, you go back into the living document and say, okay, these things did not work. How do we make them better? Let's update this document to make sure that we are all moving towards the goal of making it an awesome game. So during these demos, you're going to update your project specs. You're going to say, hey, what did we deliver? And they were met. We did it. Good job, guys. Pat on the back. What designs had to be changed, because some things, who knew that pressing A to shoot a gun in an FPS was a bad idea? Maybe we should use the trigger button. Those designs can change. What deliverables were removed from development? And this is important. As things go on, you might have a great idea and your customer might have a great idea, but they might not work. Or they might work, but they might not be good for the project that you're working on. And at that point, you just remove those deliverables and say, okay, this is not worth the time and effort. We're removing it. And then at this point, you choose the next deliverables, move on to the next schedule, and start to work again. But why is this important? Why is it important to do demos? Because if you are working in a team, then you can demo it yourself, of course. You can always do your own testing and everything. But the problem with making your own testing is that you're putting some biases. You already know the rules of the game, and you already know how the game's supposed to function. So you're not giving a really good demo or schedule of the game. Because the fact of the matter is, I've never actually had a design document or design spec or project spec in which 100% of all the edge cases and all of the things that's gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. It's infinite. Like in virtual games, in video games, you're never gonna be able to hit 100% of all your edge cases. So making these playthroughs will actually show these edge cases as playtesters try to do new things. They try to do things that they thought were possible. So for example, if you have some kind of UI that for some reason something looks like a button but isn't a button, that might signal you to either change the art asset or make it a button. So these demos are especially important for those to find out those things and be able to iterate on that. If you don't have this, then you end up being in this pod, in this closed hive mind where everybody's thinking this game is great, this game is amazing, because everybody already knows what the intention, how the game is, and how the game is supposed to be. So you're very much failing at seeing how outside parties will do it. The last reason this is very important is that it doesn't allow customers to be able to renege on deliverables. So let's say you have a demo and you say, hey, did we meet these deliverables? The customer says, yes, I love it. This color of green looks beautiful. I love it. It allows us so that later on in future demos, they can't go back and say, oh, I don't like that color green. It should have been red. And you can be like, no, we have documentation, you saying that you wanted it to be green and that you were okay with it being green. And it's okay if we change it to red, but that's going to take more development time. And that's going to be some things that weren't in our scope. So you're going to need to give us more time or more resources to be able to go back on those things. Because we already said those things as if they were already done. And going back and working on things that are already done makes it sometimes a little bit more difficult. Okay. So those are all the things that I have done while working with customers and my kind of headspace when I'm working with customers. So let's go a little bit more into 3 lessons that I've learned while working with customers. 3 lessons that I failed or succeeded or did things in for me and what I learned about them. So number 1, definitions are not universal. Do not assume the definition of words. A lot of the times you'll see customers and the team talking about words, and if a word keeps on popping up and up more often and they seem to be a little bit dubiousness about what is being said, make sure you set those definitions straight. The reason is because to different cultures, different teams, different party members, a word can mean different things. For example, while I was working with Bandai-Namco, they kept on saying that they wanted a game. And they wanted a game. So the way that we approached Galaga Fever was, okay, we're going to make a game. This game is going to have point system. It's going to be very arcadey, so you keep on playing until you lose. But you can lose in level 1. If you just are bad at the game, you can lose at level 1. And we kept on talking about game until little by little we were noticing that their designs didn't make much sense for a game. They were talking about, we don't want the player to be able to lose, and we want it to always be at most 5 minutes. And there were a lot of these things that they were talking to us where we were starting to be like, this isn't feeling like a game. This is feeling more like an experience, more like a interactive experience where you are in virtual reality. You can't lose. It's kind of like a Disney ride where you go all the way through and you will always go all the way through. And that's what they wanted. They wanted more of an experience. They wanted it so that the first 4 minutes you can't lose, and the last minute you can lose, but you can also win. So that changed a lot of our designs, and being able to communicate and find out that what they wanted was not a game was very important for us to find out what is exactly what they wanted. Learning to listen, also very important. When you're working with customers, it's very important to be able to listen, to ask a lot of questions, to get to the core of what they're asking of you. A lot of the times they will say things of what they want, and what they want might not necessarily be what they truly want. It's just that it's being very difficult to say what they want. So make sure that you get really good at asking a lot of questions. A lot of times a whiteboard helps a lot with this, of like, is this kind of how you want it to look? Is this the flow that you want it to do? Mark Rosewater, who is a lead designer in Magic the Gathering, has a good quote saying, players are very good at pointing out problems, but are not necessarily good at pointing out solutions. So keep that in mind. This isn't 100% all the time, but a lot of the time when a customer and players keep on telling you, I don't like this feels weird, listen to those things. Those things are very important. Don't discard them as if, oh, they probably didn't understand the game. That's probably a problem with your game and your design. With the caveat of, a lot of these players are going to come to you and they're going to say, I think this feels weird. I think you should do this instead. And those things are things that you're going to be like, okay, good, let me write that down. It probably isn't the right solution that we're looking for, but that problem is a real problem. And lastly, learning to say no. So a big thing about game development and customers is customers are very much, they want their more bang for their buck. They want to get as much as possible with doing as little, giving as little as possible. So you're gonna have to be able to learn to say no. Now, I'm not saying say a hard no of like just saying no and walk away, because all that's gonna do is gonna make the customer resent you. It's gonna make it's gonna have you feel like a jackass, and you're not gonna be able to have more a better relationship with that person. But because you have a living document and because you have deliverables, you can show them, hey, this is what you said you wanted. If you want something new, my first thing is say, no, we can't do something new with the resources and the time you've given us. However, if you give us more time, or if you give us more resources, if you deprioritize something to prioritize this new thing, we can do it. We can do it as long as, with the caveat of there's some things that are gonna have to change. So it's important to have these conversations. So it's not just learning to say no, it's learning to say no and explaining why. Why this is not a possible thing. This is another thing that while being at, I learned a lot while being with Bandai-Namco, because they would keep on asking for new features, and I had a lot of times had to say, hey, we do not have time for this, so you're gonna have to, and it was a project that had a like solid deadline. We had to deliver it by this date, so no matter how many more resources or time they were willing to get, we still had deadlines, so we couldn't move that deadline. So we had to deprioritize some things, or they would understand, okay, that's fair, we can't do that. I won't ask for it again. And sometimes they will be like, no, I don't want to pay you more, I don't want to give you more time, and I don't want to deprioritize anything, I just need you to do this as well. In those cases, those are much more difficult conversations to have. Those are usually more conversations for producers and managerial positions of like, hey, sorry, we can't do it. And at that point, it becomes it's kind of a two-way street. You don't want to work for customers that are very inconsiderate. So at that point, it becomes hey, you as a developer are gonna have to say a hard no. And just remember that probably you won't be able to work with this customer again because they are very inconsiderate. And that is pretty much everything for my presentation. It was a quick, 30-minute presentation. I'm opening it up to questions. Any questions that you might have, whether it be from the presentation, whether it be more about being Hispanic in game development. I'm right now in Seattle, so any questions about that, Wizards of the Coast, anything like that, questions are more than welcome. You can write them out in the comments section. I also have one more slide that I didn't feel like I didn't know where to put it. It talks a little bit more about what a customer, producer, product owner, and project manager, what those positions are. Those are different in different industries or different jobs. So if you have any questions about that, then let me know. Yeah, I'm feature creeping the presentation right now. I guess I didn't talk with myself about, hey, I'm not allowed to let you guys talk about questions or stuff like that. Unless that was supposed to be a question mark instead of an explanation point of what is a feature creeper. Then you can let me know. Also, you can talk in Spanish as well. Si quieren saber un poquito de mí, yo soy de Guaynabo, crecí en Guaynabo. Entonces después de eso me mudé para Georgia cuando fui a la universidad en Georgia Tech, y de ahí fui a California, donde ya que vino, y de California a Seattle. So, he estado por muchos sitios, muchos diferentes trabajos, muchas diferentes posiciones. So I wanted to ask, was there a particular challenging working on such a famous game like Magic compared to other experiences? Yes, definitely there was a challenge. So there's a few challenges with working on Magic the Gathering that is very interesting, that is not very normal. One of the challenges is that Magic the Gathering Arena is a game in which we don't have that many game designers. The reasoning is because we don't make the cards. The cards are being made in the paper product by another team. So we don't get much say in what the cards are. So it's almost as if we're a porting team. Of course, there's a lot of features and a lot of gameplay that we add to it with auto tapping and social features and matchmaking and all these things. But especially with Magic the Gathering, we didn't get much say in what the cards were. So it's a very interesting situation in that whenever a customer comes to you and they say, hey, we want this, you already have that hard set deliverable of the new set is gonna come out, the new cards are coming out this date, and that is immovable. There are not laws, but there are rules and things said by corporate that are essentially telling us you have to be get to those points and get to those you have to meet these deliverables. Other things are more movable, those are not movable. Other than that, there is a lot riding on us. Of course, Magic the Gathering is a game loved by millions, and creating a digital version of that game, there's a lot of expectation. It's a 25 plus year game, so there are a lot of expectations of what Magic is and isn't. So there is a lot of weight on us to be able to deliver a Magic experience without the paper product. So that's a good question. Yeah, there was a lot of challenges with working with Magic. A lot of things. This is my first corporate job. A lot of passing things through our law, through lawyers of like, hey, can we do this or whatever? And they'll be like, no, we can't do that, and stuff like that. So, but that's true in every corporate job. You'll find out that there are outside forces that are stop you from doing such things. So, yeah, Olguibea, sorry if I say your name wrong, Perez, does one have to be a gamer in order to be a better game developer? So that's a good question. For again, going back to what definitions are not universal, gamer is a very charged word. What does a gamer mean? So what I'm gonna put two definitions on my one definition. A gamer is somebody who takes games as a hobby. It is their main hobby, and they have it so that they play games on a regular basis. So I'm not considering gamers people who played one game or play a game once every 2 years if it's like a game that talks to them. I am considering gamers. Mobile gamers are gamers, definitely. Even a lot of people like to deride those people, saying that they are casual gamers or stuff like that. I don't really like to say that. That's just a different venue of game development. And I don't like people who deride like game developments of mobile games or gamers just because they play a much more casual game rather than a 50-hour RPG like Final Fantasy. So, does one have to be a gamer in order to be a better game developer? I do not think that you need to be a gamer, as in this is my hobby and I need to be a gamer to make game development. However, I do believe that if you're not going to be a gamer, you're going to have to be a game researcher. So you're going to have to be someone who maybe doesn't enjoy playing games in their off time, but is willing to look at different games, look at different genres, and play those games from a more research perspective. More of a, I'm going to take a paper and I'm going to write what mechanics worked, what mechanics don't work, and all these things. Those are things that as a gamer you kind of already process automatically, so it makes it easier for you to do. But if you're not a gamer and you want to get into game development, whether it be in art or whether it be as a programmer, you need to make sure that you understand keywords and key lingo that is used in the area. So I would say, do you have to 100% be a gamer? No, it is going to be a bumpy road, but you don't need to be a gamer, but you need to be willing to treat researching games as if it were part of your job, and being up to date. It's kind of essentially the same with any other medium or any other development. You don't need to be an avid consumer of that. If you want to write a book, but you're not much of a book reader, you can do that, but you're going to need to read a lot about what is a 3-act structure, the hero with 1,000 faces, of the 12 steps of the hero's journey. What are these techniques and tools that I can use to write a story? So yeah, I don't think that you need to be a heavy involved in your hobby or what you're trying to do. You just need to be very wary of that, and also be very wary of getting asking for help, getting help whenever you need it. And Virtual World Arcade, our CEO was not a traditional gamer. He didn't play that many video games. He played a few games here and there, like how's it called? Mega Man Battle Network. He played that, and he played Mario Party and stuff like that. But it was very much a once in a blue moon. He didn't really consider himself a gamer, but he wanted to make games because he had experiences that he wanted to tell through an interactive medium. And the way he did it was that he asked for help. He hired me and a few other gamers to ask them, hey, I'm not a gamer, but how do I get to this point? How do I make these games? So yeah, thank you for that question. That is a very good question. While more questions come around, I'll just talk a little bit about what all these different titles mean. I see this being a huge... Ooh, another question. Oh, I know you kind of went over it, but what tips would you have for dealing with a particularly stubborn customer asking for a friend? Okay, so when working with a particular stubborn customer, another thing that I didn't mention that is a very good way of going through it is changing your pronouns to say we. Instead of I can't do this or our team can't do this, be more like we can't do this. Our team, you are part of our team. And you can't do this because you don't have time. So kind of have them as part of that process, and even through all the demos and iterative processes, just changing those small words to making them feel more like they're part of the process goes a long way. Makes it very much so that way they feel like whenever they're adding a feature, they're adding more work to them as well. Which is true. If they ask for a new feature, that means that they're going to need to demo it more. There's going to be more bugs that they're going to have to swift through and all these things. So making sure that they feel like they're part of the team, even though they're technically not part of the team, is very important to trying to make dealing with a stubborn customer. Like I had mentioned before, a lot of the things, having those Moscows, prioritizing, deprioritizing, setting estimations, having real life equivalents is also pretty good. So if you can like talk to him, yes, inclusive language is that's what it's, brain fart, inclusive language is what it's called. Let me like that. Boom, me liking stuff, that's crazy. Another thing, what was my train of thought? Dealing with a particularly stubborn customer. Oh yeah, another thing is bringing real life examples, or not just real life examples, because all examples will probably be real, of like, hey, what you want us to do, or the feature that you've added for some reason is multiplayer, co-op multiplayer, and that's a huge feature. It doesn't sound like much, but it is a huge feature. If you already have a multiplayer PvP game, now we want to make it co-op or something like that. That's a huge tasking, even though it's very easy to ask, I want co-op PvP. It's very hard to develop, and you can talk to them and say, hey, these are projects that we've worked before. These are things that we have done before, and this is how much time it took us. The things that you're asking, so giving them real life things is good. Having a third party also is pretty good. So if your customer comes and says, hey, we want this, and you say, no, we can't do that, and you're still having trouble, bring somebody else. This is not always going to be easy, but if you're in a corporate job, you can just bring in somebody outside from management, or a producer from another team or something like that to come in and be like, no, who is in the right? How much time do we have? Maybe the other producer can say, I think you can do it if you have this many resources, and we can provide those resources and stuff like that. So, and at the end of the day, I know it's very hard to do, but whenever you have a stubborn customer to the point of it's my way or the highway, and you cannot come to a common ground, the question will inevitably become, do we try to meet their requirements and do a subpar quality a game, or do we ignore them and we do a quality game, but maybe break contracts, maybe break ties, and we won't be able to work with them ever again and stuff like that. My personal this is all context. Sometimes I'll do one, sometimes I'll do the other, but my personal one for me is usually go with the higher quality product. The idea here being that if you do a bad quality product, the game is probably going to flop. And the idea here is that you already are in a position where you and your customer are not on the same page, and you're not going to want to work with this customer again. So now you're actually looking ahead. What you're trying to do is you're trying to decide, what is the best project I can make for my next customer, for somebody else? What is the good product that I can make for the next person that I'm going to work for? And you're not going to be able to bring forth a crappy product and be able, hey, I can work for you. Look at this crappy product that I worked on before. So it pretty much, it is a, like, you're in this awkward position between the two. But if you are in that position in which you have to decide, follow the customer but deliver a low quality product, or decide to continue with your deliverables, bring out the contract card of, hey, our contract said this and this is what you wanted, we are not changing it, and being able to produce that at a better quality, even if your customer isn't happy with it, at least does bring forth a better game that you can show it to your next customer, to your next person that might contract you or work with you. And at the end of the day, if the game is really good and the game sells, your customer can't be too mad at you. You can't, you didn't do what I asked of you, but the game still succeeded. So I'm not going to work with you again because you are a renegade developer, but I am still sort of happy with your development. So good question, Gabriel. What tips you have for dealing with a particularly stubborn? Thank you. That's, and it also comes into, and I don't fault anybody who their answer is, my goodness, I need to make the customer happy, and I need to, like, there's a contract job, and I need to make money, and I need to answer these, do whatever they ask for. I don't fault anyone who is in that position. A lot of different people have different morality values and things like that. So, not morality values, my bad. This is not about morality, just a different headspace and different context to the situation. So yeah, but for me, it's much more about delivering quality content instead of delivering what one person will be happy about. So yeah, I see that Pete White has joined. He's actually one of my managers and one of our product owners at Wizards of the Coast. So I work with him closely. So if he would like to follow up any of these questions or answers, he's more than willing, more than open to do so. Let me go back to this quick thing. This is probably, if nobody has any more questions, the thing that I'll leave you with, because this is something that through my development years, a lot of different companies have a lot of different answers to what is a customer, what is a product owner, what is a producer, and what is a project manager. And this seems to be kind of the generic, like, good way of looking at what each person does. And if you are an indie development team, the studio, this might be something that you might want to use as your baseline for who is the customer, who's the producer, who's the product owner, who's the project manager. So customer is what we had this whole presentation about. They are essentially, they're not part of the development team. But you can still have them be involved so that way they feel inclusive. They decide which deliverables are required to complete each project. So like we said, and they have intermittent reviews through demos to make sure that the project is coming along exactly what they want. The product owner is sometimes, but not always, a designated role. So you'll have a product owner who's also a programmer, or a product owner who is also a producer, or things like that. And these are designated roles, and these are a conduit for the customer, but it's on the development team. So they're on the development team. They're usually the ones that get the last say on designs that haven't been gone through the customer. So you're only meeting with your customer every week or every 2 weeks. The product owner is kind of like the daily person there who is the conduit of saying, no, this does not meet our customers' wants. No, this does not meet things like that. So they are the final word on design decisions or tech decisions, depending on what kind of product owner they are. Again, this isn't always the case. These are like very general rules for what each one does. The producer. A lot of times people think of producers as the people who give the money and that's it. But no, producers are much more important in teams. They are usually full-time positions. And what they do is they advocate for resources and devise them accordingly. So whenever their customer requires more things, the producer is the one who says, well, I know my team. I know what we can do. We cannot do what you're asking for this much time. We need more resources. And once they get those resources, they decide, okay, I'm going to put 2 programmers to work on this one feature. I'm going to put this one artist to work on this one feature and this one other artist to work on this other feature. They're the ones who do that. They're the ones who constantly are asking you, hey, how are your project doing? Are you going to meet your deliverables? So that way they have a better estimation as to how the project as a whole goes through. Usually the customer, product owner, and the producer are all in kind of cahoots. They all are always talking with each other about how the game is going. And the project manager is more like kind of like a producer and a PO merged into one. And they manage the development of each high level deliverable. So they do a lot of what the producer is doing, but they also serve as that conduit for a designated role of this is what happens, this is what not happens, and everything. Producers in game Corral y Rosa is likely one of the most important roles on your team, and a good producer is your greatest ally. That is so true. If you have a good producer, they essentially are your bodyguard. They're your lifeline to pretty much everything, especially when to dealing with stubborn customers and with upper management and everything. Producers are essentially the tank of the team. They take all the rough spots of like, oh, we need you guys to do this. You guys aren't going fast enough. You guys aren't doing this, or that. And producers are the ones that hear it and are defending you and are saying, no, we are doing this. These are the deliverables we were meant to do. And they're also the ones that turn around and say, hey, they don't feel happy about this. How about we change things up? Or do you feel like, then this is why being not being a producer, but having a good producer is so great. A good producer understands your plight. They are part of the team. Don't look at them as some leadership person who just tells you what to do. They are part of the team, and you should be a good producer. A good relationship with your producer is one where you feel comfortable going to them and saying, I cannot meet this deliverable. I either need more resources or need more time. And a producer will in turn try to understand why were those things not met so that next time they can have a better estimations, or also be able to say, okay, I understand you. This was bigger than we thought. Let me talk with managers or customer to try to get more resources. Yeah, so the producer is very much I think producer's probably the least talked about probably position in game development, but especially in corporate where there is a lot of different influences, a lot of different sources trying to fight over what is right and what is wrong. Producers are very, very important in those positions. Shout out to my producer, Tom Shaw. Oh, like this. There we go. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this. This is one of those things where I didn't know if it really fit well with the presentation, but it's something that a lot of different companies have a lot of different definitions for all these positions. So it is definitely the thing. Like, yeah, producers are such the unsung heroes of teams that a lot of times game development, everybody talks about being a triangle where you have design, art, and programming. And technically, you're right, it is a triangle, but producers kind of hug the whole thing. They're kind of like in the middle of that whole triangle, making sure that nobody strides too far away in any direction and trying to get. They are the jelly donut, the jelly filling of donuts. They are great. And it really was until I worked in corporate at Wizards of the Coast. I knew the producers were important and that they were necessary, but I didn't really feel like I finally understood how important they were. So obviously, if you're an indie game development, just like in a lot of indie studios, not all positions are accounted for. A lot of people double dip in different positions. So producer is definitely one of those positions where you're gonna want to have somebody. Probably the lead designer is probably a good candidate for a producer because they know what they want and they can talk with you about things. They also have to make sure that they change their hats accordingly because the problem with a lead designer being a producer though is that they'll prioritize the designs that they feel are important. So if they feel like getting the gunplay is very important in a FPS, they will prioritize gun feel and gunplay over maybe the matchmaking technology. So they have to also be very careful with that. But it seems to be a good person to have as your producer. So yeah, I've been live for an hour. So unless I get any new messages in the coming next 5 minutes, I think I'll be done for today. So thank you all for coming. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, I am at FO Martin. On LinkedIn, if you want to connect with me, it's Francisco O. Martin. So pretty easy. Feel free to ask me any talk to me in Spanish or English. What was the biggest thing you needed to get used to between working for Indy and later corporate? So I'd say the biggest thing. So I'm going to answer this with the caveat that the arena team on Wizards of the Coast is it isn't indie because obviously we have big funding and we have all these things, but it does have that indie feel of the team is very new and very working on a new product that we don't have. By that I mean is that Arena is essentially the first digital video game venture that Wizards of the Coast is developing internally. That and kind of, how's it called? Magic the Gathering Online, but Magic the Gathering Online is more than 10 years old. It's a very old game. So this is like the first video game that the company has done in a long time. They've been working a lot more on board games and more traditional games. So with the caveat of there are a lot of differences, but that still some things, it won't hit me as hard as, let's say I had started working with EA or started working with Ubisoft or something like that. The biggest difference is making your mark is a little bit harder. With so many different influences and so many different voices. This is both good and bad because it's good because that means that I can focus more on programming and on making good gaming architectures and all these things, making sure that my code is pretty quality, low bug count, and all those things. But it also means that there are some design decisions that I will need to trust the designers to come up with without me having too much of an input. So that can be both a curse and a blessing in corporate versus indie development. I will have to say that while working, I feel like my voice is very much heard in at Wizards of the Coast. They are very good at having communication and ideas come from different places. So that's one thing. Yeah. Also maybe getting used to this game, Magic the Gathering Arena, is a living game. It's a game that has no end in sight. As long as there are more cards being developed, we will be continuing the game until there's either not a market for it or we decide to move to another thing. But there is no ending to it. So that's something that I had never done before. Most games that I have worked on were essentially we deliver it, we're done with it, we put it on Steam, we do some updates because of bugs and stuff like that that we didn't find. Working on this is very much a different experience of I'm working on the same project for a long time. It has both, again, curse and blessing. It means that I can be more intimate with the code and be more secure in what I'm going to be doing. It does mean that you don't get to just work on different crazy games. Though I will say that the cool thing about Magic the Gathering is it's kind of like a rule set in which we can do a lot of different ways to play it. So just like in Magic the Gathering, there's a lot of formats that you can play the game. Yeah, there is Commander, there is Limited, there is Constructed, and they have a lot of different rules. Essentially, Magic the Gathering is kind of like a rules engine, kind of like Unity, or a game engine, kind of like Unity, where you can create different experiences in games. And because of that, I've had the opportunity to create different features and different things with it. Which, by the way, I never mentioned what I actually did at Wizards of the Coast with game development. What stuff I'm actually very intimately have worked on. I worked on the tutorial system, so the game AI for Sparky, which is they are the one that teach you how to play the game and stuff like that. So the bot matches against them that I developed. I've worked on social features with them. I've worked on some deck building things and all that stuff. What else have I worked on there? And I've only been there for a year and a year and a quarter. So I'm actually rather new with them as well, relatively speaking. So yeah. Thank you all for coming. I think that was really cool. If you have any additional questions, don't feel free to shoot me a message and let me know what is up. And I hope that the Global Game Jam goes swimmingly. If I was down there, I would definitely join. But unfortunately, I have some stuff to do that weekend, and I can't fly down to Puerto Rico. I went there for Christmas, and let me tell you, the time difference was for some reason really hard on me, and I have no idea why, because I did it from California fine, but for some reason from Seattle, it was really hard on me. So, anyways, yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you for, I hope that you guys have a great time. Thank you for Global Game Jam Puerto Rico for hosting me and having me this opportunity for talking. If you want more talks like this about different things or more technical programming stuff, I bet you can talk with Global Game Jam and I can set up something else in the future. So thank you for everything. You have a good one.